Good day and welcome to another episode. It's episode 10 of Bucket List Living with Brad Norwood. I'm your host, Brad Norwood, and today a guest that I have followed forever, and you probably do too, Mr. Jason McElhone. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Appreciate it, Brad. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Oh, it's an honor. You know, I've followed you on LinkedIn for probably close to 2 years now. And I think when I started following you, you were around 10 to 12,000 followers, and you've now got over 55,000 followers on LinkedIn that you are just lighting up with knowledge each and every day. How'd you do it?
Yeah, I appreciate you noticing that. I started creating content in 2017. I was like everybody else. I had treated LinkedIn up until then as a job board. I think I joined in 2011. I logged in a few times a year, if that. I was very happy at the prior firm I worked at for over almost 12 years. But when I saw the Microsoft takeover of LinkedIn, I knew something was up because I was drawing on my 14 years on Wall Street. I'd owned Microsoft many times and still do today. But I had no idea that LinkedIn was about to blow up the way it has. And the good news for those that are watching, Brad, is it's bottom of the first, top of the second for social media, but in particular for LinkedIn. You know, what most folks may not realize is TV's been around over 100 years. Social media, for the most part, is about 10, and LinkedIn really didn't become what it is today, but just 3 years ago. Right. So I can still remember my first video was in the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts. It was around Thanksgiving time. I was so damn nervous. A lot of the folks out there suffer from what's called imposter syndrome, right? You don't think you're good enough. How dare you think of yourself as an expert, especially if you're young? And nothing could be further from the truth. But big old me, who'd been in sales my whole life and, rather successful, I was so damn nervous, I almost threw up the Boston cream donut that I had. And it took me at least a half an hour to gather myself. And I'll pull it up someday and share it with the community. And I held the camera probably 2 feet from my face. I was in one of my other trucks. And I can remember my arm was shaking so bad that I was nervous. I was thinking, man, I wonder if this camera is going to be a little off. But it turned out fine. I recommend that everyone who's watching, the best thing you can do when you're starting out, Brad's been there, I've been there, so is anybody else who's among the 1% that create content. Just tell your audience, hey, this is my first time. Mm-hmm. I'm very nervous. I don't know how this is going to sound, but I know I've got to do it. I've got to build something that we call a personal brand. So here I go. And what you discover is I know Brad has, is the community will rally around you. And then, it's kind of like riding a bike. The more you do it, the better you get. And then you slowly but surely build a following. And then, about a year or so ago, it just became exponential to where some of my videos were seen over 100,000 times on LinkedIn for one video, which is just an insane amount of engagement, mostly around cold calling or sales techniques. And then, you wake up 3 years later after you do dedicate a couple hours a day, and here you are at, 50,000 plus followers. And I think at last count, almost 50 million views.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And again, like you said, that nervous feeling, go throw up the donut. I remember doing the same thing. It's like, gosh, does it look right? What's the background look like? And I always had this thing and nothing against you, but I had this thing against people that seemed like every video you saw, people are sitting in their car. It's like, why do you sit in your car and do a video? But then with me, I was like, you know what? If people sit in their car and do a video and I don't like it, that means you can do a video anywhere. And it's like we talk about in the Bucket List Life Plan. Just take the first step. Write down what you want to do and then take the first step to get it done. And it really, as you've shown, becomes just a habit, something you do every day. I know you've recently gotten big into YouTube as well, and we'll even tell people, hey, we're releasing this video on Thursday on YouTube. Check it out, subscribe, and check it out. And so it's become part of your daily life, right?
Yeah, I got on YouTube for a couple of reasons. We quickly built up to about 5,000 subs in 6 weeks. talking mostly about EIDL, the economic injury loans, along with PPP, because I'm a small business owner, as I'm sure you are as well. And even though I own remotesales.com and the future looks insanely bright, I'm getting kicked in the teeth too, because we had a program, my partner and myself, that started late last year, and in February it got shut down. And then I lost a couple of deals, I personally think, because I'm a little too edgy, pushed the envelope a little too much on social media. And you hear all these excuses like, well, we needed to see this. I'm like, with all due respect, if you don't think I could sell snow to an Eskimo, then I don't know what channel you're watching, because I've been doing this my whole life. But 2 deals, 150 G's a piece, got pushed. One probably canceled. So for every small business owner, or even sales rep for that matter, who may have been furloughed or laid off, we're all going through the same thing. The world is changing dramatically. I think it's painfully obvious now, Brad, that it's never going to be the same. The scar of COVID-19 will be permanent, whether it's, the killer of millions that some thought it was, or a hoax, or somewhere in the middle. There's never going to be as many people getting on planes, trains, and automobiles, in my opinion, relative to what we saw in, February of this year. So everybody watching has to make an adjustment. How are we going to be able to not only sell virtually, but run the entire business in the midst of a lockdown? Because if it's not this pandemic, it'll be another one. There'll be a small suitcase nuclear bomb go off someday. And, you're not going to go out on the veranda and say, Helen, why don't you come on out here and take a whiff of this fresh air? No, you're going to be sucking ramen noodles through a straw from home. And so there's going to be reason for us to be able to function, be flexible, if you will, both from the office as well as the home.
Yeah, totally. And again, as a guy in the travel industry, it has turned the world upside down. Fewer people than ever, I think, agree right along with you, will travel by plane, train over the next 10 years, I think. I think the automobile industry could explode here in the very near future. I think this summer we'll see more drive traffic for vacation than ever, and possibly for the next 2 to 3 years. Drive markets in the travel industry. Just a devastating blow, but how do we pivot and move forward virtually? Like you said, you're set in a business set to boom with remote sales online. Talk a little bit about that business and what your model is, how that works, and how you help people.
Yeah. Quick backdrop. I started my career in the early 90s selling insurance for MetLife. I was in upstate New York, knocking on doors. Very scary, but tremendously rewarding experience. And then my sister and her then husband, or her future husband, hopped in our 1988 red LeBaron. I can still remember this like it was yesterday. And we just headed south on I-95, and we ended up in a small town called Orange City, which was real close to Daytona Beach. I screwed around for a few months, had a blast going out and having a good time. And then I ended up in Pompano Beach, which was right next to Fort Lauderdale. And my first night out there, I met a guy who owned a brokerage firm. And, he saw me wheeling and dealing with a couple of girls. And he said, you seem to have a gift of gab. Why don't you come work for me? Long story short, I got my Series 7's license, and I was making, loads of money in my 20s and early 30s. And then I built a house in Delray in 2000. And for the next 7 years, Brad, I worked out of a spare bedroom overlooking the pool. I mean, it was just total opulence. I had palm trees in my backyard. I had this giant rock waterfall in my pool. And I was done trading by noon. Most days I would trade the open of the market, call my clients if necessary. And then I was goofing off from noon on for many, many, many years. And then fast forward to this year, after spending 12 years at my prior firm, I was kind of burned out. I said, I've done what I could do. I built a very successful inside lead gen team at my prior company, and said, it's time for me to go do something on my own. And I actually did not come up with remote sales until about a week after I left. I was sitting on one of my couches upstairs, and I said, okay, now what am I going to do? And I was flashing back at my times in Florida. And I said, man, I loved working remotely, working out of the house, no commute. I was a lot more productive. I didn't have any of the office politics, water cooler bullshit. And then I said to myself, yeah, but you've been selling your whole life. And then suddenly remote and sales came together. I raced over to my computer, went to register.com, $10,000. And you may have seen my post yesterday where I said, oh my goodness, I didn't have $10,000 to burn because I knew I was going to be on my own for the rest of my life, or at least for the next several years. So every dollar was going to, count. But after wrestling it for a week or two, I ended up buying it from a guy in Miami. And not in my wildest dreams, I thought this was going to take me 10 years to build this company. And even though, I'm getting punched in the gut, like I said, along with everyone else, my goodness, it's got to be two of the most valuable keywords in the world. There are thousands of companies right now who are thinking, how are we going to be able to operate out of the home? How are we going to get our people equipped with the technology and the support, the training that they're going to need? So that's where my wheelhouse is. We hire, we train, and we manage remote sales teams. So companies may come to me and say, I need to build out a team. Great, we can help you with that. Or they might say, we've got a team that's kind of flexible. Half were coming to the office, the other half were at home, but we're not performing on a level that we need to be. So can you come in and train us on things like cold calling, email marketing, and of course, content creation and social selling right now, which is just going through the roof.
Sure, yeah, and you're the best at it by far that I know of for sure, and I'm one of the 55,000 that follow you that would obviously agree at that. Your cold calling tips that you give out all the time have been pure gold. I know you gave me one on a post and then a personal phone call about 6 months ago about just sending out email around the 11 o'clock hour, because the 11 o'clock hour, everybody's starting to head out. They're either at lunch or headed out to lunch. And what's the first thing they do? They grab their phone, they start checking email. My open rates alone on my email have gone up to 20% on an average email. It's been amazing advice that you've given out. I appreciate that. I know others do. And those that need help with their remote sales teams obviously need to reach out to you for that. So that leads into a question I've got for you. With remote sales teams and this world that this work from home world that we're about to face, that's hit us right in the face, how important is it, and how do you create culture, a work culture, when everybody's remote? How do you do that in remote sales?
Yeah, well, the obvious starter, of course, is technology. You've got Slack, which you don't want to spend too much of your time on that. It can become addictive and non-productive, as some of the folks watching who will definitely know. And then, of course, Zoom. But what might surprise some people is, even though I would profit immensely if nobody ever left the house again, I want us to get back out there. I want to see you back out on the links and at the Masters this November, living your life. The best way that you can build culture outside of the obvious technology, which would also include, email, texting, FaceTime, etc., is you got to have local meetups. You got to get out of the house. Maybe it's, a local exercise club where you get together with fellow remote workers and you go for a nightly walk or a jog. Maybe it's getting out to the golf course on a Friday afternoon with folks that are working from home. You can't just lock yourself in the house. And maybe we can touch on it a bit later with respect to the virus. It's dealt us a tremendous blow. But for every business that's going to go under, there'll be another one that'll pop up. The world is very adaptive. There's going to be new technology. The future of Zoom, for example, I can foresee, I'm downstairs in my office. You're not going to be staring at a screen as you and I are right now doing this 5 years from now. It's going to be beam me up, Scotty, virtual augmented reality, where you'll be in your living room or you'll be on the beach around a picnic table and you'll see your team or you'll see your prospect. You'll reach out and touch them. There's nothing but air, but I'm going to see what Brad's doing, 1,000 miles away. So it's going to be an amazingly productive, fascinating world that we go into. The technology is going to be elevated to a whole new level. The LinkedIn, the head of product just became the new CEO a couple of months ago. What we're going to see in terms of the app, in my opinion, and I've talked about some of it in the next few years is going to blow people away in terms of, say, for example, voice activated AI, where you're going to be able to use the Siri, the Alexa, what Microsoft has, Google Assistant, to dive into your network and get real granular. Hey Alexa, how many of my connections live in the Dallas area? 900. How many of those 900 have engaged with me in the last 3 months? 410. How many of those 410 work for a company doing north of 50 million, et cetera, et cetera? And you whittle it down to the people that are not only engaged with your content, not only have an industry and probably a pain point or a problem that you can solve, and then without ever putting your fingers on a keyboard, Brad, or picking up a phone, you'll be able to tell AI through voice activation, hey, send those 35 people an invite to the Masters and include a $500 gift card for the hotel down the street. And to the finger. But that's why your network is your net worth. If you don't have the network, if you're not putting a couple, as you and I are right now, to build that out, you're not going to be able to tell AI in a few years what he or she or it needs to do.
Sure. Yeah. No, I love that perspective. Love that perspective, and your LinkedIn blue button idea that's coming to fruition. I'm excited about that one as well. If you haven't heard about the blue button idea and you don't already follow Jason, be sure follow him on YouTube and on LinkedIn. Send him a connect or a follow on LinkedIn, because he has single-handedly talked about this blue button idea that's coming to LinkedIn, and it's AI related, and I love it. It's going to work. It's going to be the game changer for LinkedIn, won't it?
Yeah, in terms of the blue button idea, we both saw the whole 3 ways to follow phenomenon that drove most of us nuts. But some went from 10,000 followers to 200,000 or more overnight. And it wasn't because of their content. It was because they were playing follow the leader. And it was really bringing down the quality of everybody's feed. So I had an idea one day that it would be much smarter to come up with a blue button similar to the green one that shows you whether or not someone's on their phone or their desktop. And it simply says, I'm open to connect with anyone. So everyone goes into the privacy settings and you say, yes, I'm open to connect with strangers, or I'm not. And the minute you hit, yes, I am, that little blue button, a line, a check, something lights up, and nobody has to play these ridiculous games anymore. And you can even, ding, 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 just by hovering over someone's profile picture. And I suggested to LinkedIn that they also make open to connect searchable. So anyone who's got a blue button that's lit up 6 months or a year from now, you can go in, search. There's the 10 million people that are open to connect with everyone. And let's say they limit everybody to 50 to 100 connects a day. You could have as monstrous of a network that you want, or be more niche or quality over quantity, without driving the entire community absolutely bonkers with all these 3 ways to grow posts.
Absolutely. We're on the same boat as that. Connect and follow and comment and tell what you do and blah, blah, blah. So that brings me to the question, though, for a guy that has so many followers, is it more important, in your opinion, to gear it down to a niche, or just to connect with those who want to connect?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked me that question. I'm actually going through a bit of a metamorphosis as we speak. I used to be obsessed with numbers and followers. I said I wanted 1 million YouTube subscribers. I've said I wanted 1 million LinkedIn followers. I knew it was going to take me 5 to 10 years to get there. But then I started talking about the virus and, the reality of it, because it is real, and then the fraud or the fear mongering that's going on behind the scenes. And I realized one day, when I suggested 2 weeks ago, it's time to responsibly reopen our economy. The minute I put that out there, I got unfollowed by 1,500 people in about an hour. And the reason for that is I sounded like number 45, who hangs out at 1600 Pennsylvania Ave. I've never mentioned him. I didn't say I voted for him. But the fact that I said it's time to save the small business owner and reopen this country, perhaps a little early, kaboom. And then I've realized over the last couple of weeks, I'd rather know of the 50,000 that I have, give me the 10,000 that are in the foxhole. You don't always have to agree with me. In fact, I'd rather you didn't. I'd rather say, Jason, I love you, but you're way off on this one, and here's why. because I can assure every salesperson in particular who's watching, anyone who's hanging on the fence, you know, I'm not sure if I like Jason or Brad, maybe I should unfollow, maybe I shouldn't. That's a prospect, soon to be client, that will fire your ass in about 2 months into the program. You want people that are all the way in, that love Brad or Jason or Sarah, regardless of what we say, even though you disagree with what my message might be from time to time. So I'm much more now about, give me 100,000 LinkedIn followers and 100,000 YouTube subs. It'll take me a year to 18 months, maybe 2 years to get there. But I want people who are all the way in, who are willing to let me speak my mind, and I will let them do the same. Because guess what? Those are all also the people, Brad, that are going to write the checks and hand over the credit cards. It's not the ones that are going to flip out if I sound a little too alpha or like you know who in the White House.
Yeah, totally. You know, you and I have been known to walk a very fine line from time to time. And I'm with you. You know, you're either for us or you're against us, and respect the opinion that differs, right? That's what social media is for. Voice your opinion. We can agree to disagree. That's great. But like you said, let's reopen America. There's some phases that we might need to go through, but it's time to stop killing the small business that is America, right? In fact, we use the term small business all the time. And I tell people, quite frankly, even though I'm the only guy in my business, it's not a small business. I've got 3 kids to feed, a wife to feed. There's all kinds of pressure. You know, I'm up the 12 hours a day that I work vary, right? It's not small by any means, but we walk a fine line sometimes. And I love a guy that doesn't worry about what he's got to say, that says his opinion, gets it out there like you do. And I appreciate that. I love it.
Yeah, I told my sister along that point, Brad, probably 2 months ago, right before I started my YouTube channel, because I started YouTube not just to have a library of my videos, but I want to push the envelope outside of just sales and remote work. Those are 2 passions of mine, but that's not the only thing that Jason ever thinks about or talks about with friends and family. And along comes the virus, and for the record, it's real. What most folks don't realize is coronavirus has been around for 40 years. There's 1,100 strains of coronavirus, some of which have patents. By the way, if you want to get an eye-opener, go ahead and Google who owns patents on coronavirus, and you might be shocked. In fact, you probably won't be shocked as to who it is. So it's a real virus, in my opinion, that's been hijacked with the help of the mainstream or lamestream media to scare the bejesus out of billions of people. Because now we're waking up. Even the most cynical that may have unfollowed Jason 2 or 3 weeks ago is realizing something doesn't add up here. We were told in the United States, for example, we might lose 2 million people. Well, we're supposedly at 90,000 and change, but now we've got dozens of doctors that are being banned, including in the state of California, 2 Democrat doctors in a very blue liberal state who are saying that, A, we've been pressured to put COVID-19 as cause of death. Now, why is that? Well, there's no elective surgery. The hospitals are empty. The nurses are being furloughed by the thousands. Is it way out of the question that a hospital might say when Joe dies of a heart attack at 82, well, I think we need to check COVID-19 because there's 13 grand there. You put them on a ventilator, it's 39,000. So we have a real virus that will really go after the elderly and the immune compromised. But we've had this absolute fabrication of a scam, for lack of a better word. And as I said this morning in my post, Brad, follow the money. Who's getting rich right now? Well, 2 stocks I recommended back in March, Amazon and Microsoft. You think Jeff Bezos, for example, would mind if you never left your house again? No. He would have a drone outside my door or one of those silly vans every hour on the hour for the rest of my life. And Bill Gates, tremendous guy, built a hell of a company. I own the stock, has investments in companies that indirectly have patents on the virus. And he's well known, for example, if we haven't offended enough already, in the past, talking about population control. his words, not mine, it's too crowded, to now wanting to vaccinate everybody. You can't do a flip-flop like that. You can't say we need to downsize by 10%. In other words, limit population growth or get rid of, I don't know, let's see, the elderly and the immune compromised. And then all of a sudden say, I want you to have what's called a quantum fingerprint, his dream of putting a chip on the top of your forearm, along with a vaccine. My question to everybody is, I wonder what's in that vaccine.
Yeah, that's a great question. And how many people are blind to the fact that of how many thousands of vaccines do we already have, and you can still catch whatever virus it is that they're there to prevent, right? It's still going to happen. It is a real virus, but boy, oh boy, behind the scenes, you know, what blows me away is when we have a tornado that hits somewhere in the country and things are bad in that part. Let's just say New York City. Things are really bad there right now, right? But that's where the tornado hit. Tornado hasn't hit Atlanta. It hasn't hit LA. It hasn't hit Springdale, Arkansas. We've got nurses, hospitals going out of business because there's no elective surgeries going on, and nobody's, quite frankly, nobody's sick. You know, we're sending nurses to areas of disaster, no different than when we do to go help flood victims and tornado victims, hurricane victims. We disperse from our own hometowns and go help the people that are in need. Why have we shut down our entire country over this one deal?
Yeah, two things I'd love to make along those lines. Number one, in my, because this, again, virus that goes after the elderly and the immune compromised. We should have surrounded every nursing home within seconds of this virus breaking out here in the United States. We didn't. There was a lot of news out there. We're dragging the feet. I don't know why that is. I'll let the audience decide why we weren't in a race to help the elderly. I would have surrounded every single one. I would have made sure they were disinfected instantly, and then get those folks, along with the immune compromised, all the support they need, not just through medication, but through natural homeopathic therapy, prayer, meditation. Put 100 people outside of every nursing home and have them pray for those that are inside. A lot of folks might think that's ridiculous. It's not. Instead, it was all about flatten the curve. Okay, now that we flatten the curve, now it's the LA mayor wants to say, I'm not going to open up my city until we get a vaccine. Really? You're going to be in semi-lockdown for the next 18 months while we wait for a vaccine? If people don't see the politics in that, I don't know what planet they're on. So in addition to taking care of the elderly and the immune compromised, we also need to realize how many people are home right now with angina, or how many people are at home right now probably having a heart attack, saying to their husband or their wife, you know, I don't want to go to the hospital and get COVID-19. So he just ends up laying on the couch and has a heart attack and dies. I'll bet you the body count of those that didn't go that should have, because the hospitals were shut down to elective surgery and the nurses were furloughed, is as big or bigger than the so-called 90,000 that we've lost to the virus. And if that's not enough to scare people as to why we need to responsibly reopen our country, 100 million people, Brad, work for a small business. We've got about 160 million in the US that are working, or at least were in February. About 100 million of them work for a company with 10 or less employees. You and I are two examples of that. According to every study that I've read in the last 2 months, 1/3 of them are on the edge right now of going bankrupt. And I've been involved in trying to get EIDL and PPP to small businesses. Do you guys realize that 70% have not gotten their money? In my own state of Georgia, your state is, the Masters, not too far from me, about an hour up the road, 10 million people are still waiting on their unemployment checks. The system's over a month backed up. And yet a lot of us want to wait on the federal government to bail our ass out. If we don't get back to work and reopen this country right now, and we can do it and maybe even talk about it on how to do it responsibly, we've got 30 million or more people that are drinking, drugging, perhaps beating their significant other as we speak. And the numbers that we're ultimately going to lose, Brad, are going to trump the so-called 90,000 and change that we've lost to the virus.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, the state of Arkansas even had their PUD system was hacked. And so here we are 2.5, 3 months into this thing, no money received. And now we've been hacked, and who knows how long. Now there's the FBI's involved in the investigation. Who knows how long it's going to take. And yeah, they're going to back pay you, but eventually, like you said, we're running out of time. We're running out of life. So that segues us into, go ahead. You've got something to say. Go ahead.
And before we perhaps talk about how to do it responsibly and fairly for everyone, regardless of what side of the political aisle that you're on, we need to keep in consideration there's a lot of young folks in this country that are, let's say, under the age of 40, most of whom are either not affected or asymptomatic with respect to the virus. And many of those folks, Gen X, millennials, even 50-year-olds like myself, work for a small business and they don't have to go to the office. I would estimate, based on my research, 80% are what we call non-essential. You don't have to leave the house. And what millions of people are discovering right now, Twitter just announced you can work from home forever. You know why that is? It's not only a competitive advantage for Dorsey. He realizes, along with all of his upper management in this lockdown, gee, we've actually been more productive. We've written code. We've gotten shit done. We've had our meetings, and no one's had to pollute the environment. Just look at the overhead shots in LA, smog-free, or the videos on Twitter from the folks that live in New Delhi that can see the Himalayan peaks for the first time in 30 years. Some of those videos, by the way, are tearjerkers. People in their 60s and 70s that could never see the mountains now can. And that's just turning it off now for 6 or 8 weeks. We were always told it was going to take us 30 years to clean up the environment. Wrong. Not only can we clean up the environment quickly, but millions of people that are with small businesses in particular that are going to be not only without a job, but without a company in the next 4 or 5 weeks as we wait on this stimulus. We could turn the lights on now and be at 80% capacity. All the HR, all the finance, all the marketing, all the sales, 80% at least could be running smoothly in 5 minutes. And that leaves 20% that's essential. And I might as well take the lead to segue into my next point. Three steps, Brad. Very simple. Keep 80% at home for the rest of the year, as Facebook, Zillow, Salesforce announced the same thing the other day. Stay at home. We'll give you the technology, Zoom, Slack, etc. We'll be just fine. The second step is the 20% that are essential. Let them wear a mask. Let them wear a hazmat if that's what they're comfortable with. If they have a pre-existing condition, come to the office with whatever you're comfortable in. Every front, side, and back door should have masks for everybody to wear. Move the desk 6 feet apart. Let's not hug and shake hands, at least for the rest of the year. And here's an idea I have not heard, similar to what Mark Cuban said. Create the COVID-19 cleaning card. Send every small business a debit card with $2,000 on it. You got to spend it within 30 days or it disappears. And it must be spent on cleaning supplies and or cleaning service. If we catch you buying beer, and it wouldn't be hard to track it, down at the local 7-Eleven, the card's cut off.
Yep.
That way you've got crystal clear office space where the 20% that have to schlep to the office are protected, whether it's with a mask, a hazmat, or both. And then step 3 is create a COVID-19 hotline. I actually investigated this yesterday. 855-COVID-19 is the perfect length. It's 7 numbers. Nobody has it. It's available. Create an accompanying website, 855-COVID19.com. Give employees the opportunity to complain. Let's say that Sarah decides to go to the office, or she's part of the 20% that's essential. She can call COVID-19. If you were boss, send her an email. Sarah, if you don't take off the mask, you're fired. Violation. She should call that number immediately and say, hey, I've got my boss on tape saying that if I don't take off my mask because I've got lupus, let's say, I'm fired. Then the arbitrator, not the courts, not the judges, not the lawyers, would say, go to the website, 855-COVID19.com, upload your case, and then we give the business 30 days to appeal. So somebody reaches out and says, hey, Brad, we've got you on tape telling this young lady that if she doesn't take off the mask, she's fired. You've got 30 days to prove that she made that up, and that's going to be possible. But if you don't, you're going to get fined. Let's say it's 10 grand. And then every subsequent violation, it doubles, 20,000, 40,000, 80,000. At some point, you're going to realize, okay, it's not profitable for me to discriminate against the 20% who have to be at the office. And the PR is going to be awful because she's going to go online. Ex-boss sent me this email. Look at this SOB. Don't ever work for his organization again. So in those 3 steps, 80% stay at home, 20% follow the protocol we have for the last couple of months, create the COVID-19 card. You spend it within 2 months, within 30 days, what's allocated for cleaning and or services. And if you don't, it's cut off. And then create a hotline that protects both the employee who feels discriminated against, but at the same time gets the employer a chance to appeal the bullshit cases that will occasionally come forward. I don't see why we can't do that right now to reopen the entire world, for that matter.
I'm with you. I love the idea. It's a great plan. It works. It fits. Like you said, even the 7 digits, it fits. I don't understand why we can't do it either. But it's amazing. It brings us back to the transition point where we were headed, along with the reopen. Isn't life too short to let something like this stop us from really living?
So true. I've talked about this quite a bit. I've lost both of my parents in the last few years. My mom had a stroke May the 5th, 2015, was in a coma for a couple of weeks, and then we had to let her go. My father died in his sleep peacefully 2 years ago. All of my grandparents we've lost folks to suicide in my own family. My sister's ex-husband took his own life a few years ago. I can promise anyone who's ever seen a life end, and I've been, bedside, so to speak, the bullshit that we're seeing on TV right now means nothing. The political nonsense that's going on in our country means nothing. But yet so many are wrapped up in it. When it's your time to go, the only thing that matters is 1 or 2 things. The primary is love. I've seen with my own eyes someone hang on until all the kids and all the grandkids circle around the bed, whether it's hospice or at the hospital, and then they go. And in some cases, you'll get people asking for forgiveness. And of course, the family, they'll say, forgive me for working too much. Forgive me for not being a better father. And everyone, they say, don't worry about it. You were a great dad. And once they feel that peace, that love, that forgiveness, they let go and they transition to the other side. So if I could just stress one thing to everyone who's watching, we're going to get through this. We should not be tearing one another apart because someone's red and the other is blue. We are far more common in virtually all of our aspects. All of us want our kids to be fed and tucked in safely at night, Brad. All of us want a job that we enjoy and preferably love. And every single one of us, when we get, older and it's time to retire, we want our dignity and our health intact so we can go run around Disney World or throw a Frisbee on the beach with the grandkids. But we're so conditioned through the fake news, and it goes both ways in terms of virtually every network, to constantly be at odds with each other, to constantly be told that you're not as strong. You need the government, not only for a vaccine, but for a check. Neither is true. We're infinite spiritual beings having a temporary human experience. We've heard that since we were about this high, but far too many of us are not believing the truth, the real you, your soul, your spirit. It's infinite. We have the power to overcome this virus and any other through proper protocol, which we've all been doing through social distancing, etc. But just believing that we're one, believing that love is the answer, believing that you are strong enough if you get outside, if you get a decent night's rest, if you go run around as you have on the golf course, if you believe that you're going to make it and survive not only the pandemic, but the economic disaster and come back in ways you probably never thought possible, we will. So that would be my message to everybody. Love's the answer. We need to remember that we're connected, we're one, and we're going to get through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is bucket list living to a T right there, is that love is the answer. And that brings us to a good wrap up. Jason. I appreciate your time today, sharing the bit of a rant, and I love it. Always appreciate your viewpoint, the value that you provide online. I do have to ask you, we ask every guest on the show, I've started this due to the COVID, every successful person I know, including yourself, does the same three things. And I call it the three secrets to success in a work from home world, to work-life balance. And I know you know it. So what is it this week that you're being intentional about?
I've gotten big time into it's called your delta theta states. Right before you go to bed and when you wake up in the morning, there's a 15 to 20 minute window that your subconscious mind is receptive to whatever you put into it. So I have spent the 15 minutes or so before I drift off to sleep, and the 15 or minutes before I reach for my iPhone to check my email in the morning, meditating and praying upon what it is that I intend to create in this world. And it starts with gratitude. I believe in God. I'm not telling others that they have to do the same, but I pray to God. I tell him everything that I'm thankful for, because an attitude of gratitude has definitely helped me, especially in tough times. And then, as you could probably imagine now, I'm getting a visual of this remote sales world, and how am I going to serve others? How am I going to offer up my 30 years of experience in the business to help so many companies that are grasping for straws right now? And I get a picture of all of the folks that I'm connected to. And when I get a chance to get out on the links again, it's not just about working remotely in your house for the rest of your life. You got to get outside and meet your friends, your clients, your prospects. So I spend that time going to sleep, and when I first get up, to thank the Lord, and of course talk about or think about, even sometimes I talk out loud when I'm half awake, of where this world is going and how I can be of service.
I love it. I love it. Hey, again, appreciate your time today. Love that you wore a Masters shirt, by the way. Had one on for you too. I love it. You're on my bucket list to meet in person. When I come through Atlanta this year, we're gonna go get a cold beer sometime. Hey, again, folks, for those of you that stayed through the end, follow Jason McElhone on LinkedIn. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. I'll post it in the comments on the show. Have a great week, and remember, the bucket list life is a life worth living.